The morning light filtered through the Baroque spires with a peculiar quality that photographers would spend entire careers trying to capture. A honeyed luminescence that seemed to originate not from the sun, but from the very stones of Dresden itself, as if 3 centuries of Saxon pride had been absorbed into the sandstone and now radiated back across the Elbe River in waves of amber and gold. This was the city that Canaletto abandoned Venice to paint. The place where Augustus the Strong bankrupted half of Saxony to construct a porcelain menagerie so extravagant that European nobility whispered it was touched by either genius or madness. And on any given afternoon in 1910, you could stand on the Brühl Terrace and understand why the Germans called it the Florence on the Elbe, though that comparison always felt inadequate because Dresden possessed something Florence never had. Oda Isa Severny melancholy, a Nordic awareness of fragility that made its beauty almost unbearably precious. The Frauenkirche dominated the skyline with its stone bell dome, an architectural miracle that seemed to defy both gravity and Protestant austerity. Its blackened exterior creating a dramatic silhouette against the powder blue Saxon sky, while its interior blazed with such ornate splendor that visitors from Berlin would return home speaking of it in hushed, almost scandalous tones, as if they had witnessed something too beautiful for Prussian sensibilities. The Zwinger Palace sprawled along the western edge of the Altstadt like a Baroque fever dream made manifest. Its pavilions and galleries arranged in a horseshoe that seemed designed specifically to trap sunlight and transform it into architectural theater. Every surface encrusted with sculptures of nymphs and satyrs and mythological figures that appeared to be mid-dance, frozen in Meissen porcelain poses that suggested the entire structure might suddenly come alive during the solstice. Within its walls, the mathematics and physics collections drew scholars from across Europe, who would spend months examining instruments so precise they bordered on the magical, while in the adjacent galleries, Raphael's Sistine Madonna gazed out with eyes that had watched the Reformation unfold and seemed to know secrets about Catholic guilt that Luther had tried unsuccessfully to legislate away. The city streets radiated outward from the Residenzschloss in patterns that revealed the mathematical obsessions of 18th century Saxon princes, each boulevard calculated to provide sightlines toward some monument or fountain or carefully curated vista, creating an urban experience that felt like walking through a three-dimensional painting, where every perspective had been composed by an artist who understood both geometry and human longing. But what made Dresden truly exceptional was not merely its architecture or its collections. Rather, it was the peculiar social ecosystem that had evolved within these Baroque walls over 2 centuries, a culture that valued refinement without the aggressive militarism of Berlin, that celebrated intellectual achievement without the commercial obsessiveness of Hamburg, that maintained aristocratic traditions without the feudal rigidity of Vienna. In the coffee houses along the Prager Strasse, you could find artillery officers debating philosophy with porcelain painters, both groups smoking the same Virginia tobacco and reading the same French novels, creating an atmosphere of egalitarian sophistication that was specifically Saxon, a cultural phenomenon that visiting Prussians found simultaneously admirable and slightly suspect. The Saxon accent itself became a marker of this refined sensibility, its soft consonants and melodic cadences standing in deliberate contrast to the harsh Prussian bark, so that to hear Dresden German was to understand that language could be wielded as an instrument of grace rather than command. The secret that held this entire world together was porcelain, specifically the addiction of Augustus the Strong to the white gold that had bankrupted him multiple times, yet created an economic engine that would power Dresden's golden age for 2 centuries. The discovery of the European porcelain formula in nearby Meissen had transformed Saxony from a minor German state into a continental powerhouse, and every piece produced carried with it the DNA of Dresden's aesthetic philosophy. Beauty must be both robust and delicate. Tradition must coexist with innovation, and craftsmanship must approach the condition of art. Workers in the Meissen factories developed techniques so specialized they were sworn to secrecy on pain of imprisonment, creating a knowledge economy where the ability to paint a perfect rose on a teacup could secure 3 generations of prosperity. And this reverence for skilled labor permeated the entire city. From the stonemasons who could make sandstone appear as light as lace to the clockmakers whose mechanisms kept time with astronomical precision. The musical tradition ran even deeper. threading through every social class like a golden wire connecting past to future. The Semperoper rose along the Theaterplatz in neo-Renaissance splendor, its architect Gottfried Semper having designed an acoustic environment so perfect that singers claimed they could hear their own voices bloom in the space like flowers opening to light. And on any evening the season was active, you could watch the entire social hierarchy of Dresden parade through its doors, industrialists in tailcoats escorting wives draped in family diamonds, professors clutching scores they intended to analyze rather than merely enjoy, students in the upper galleries who had saved for months to afford a single performance, all united in the understanding that Wagner and Strauss were not entertainment, but secular sacraments that required devotion. Richard Wagner himself had conducted the premiere of Rienzi here in 1842. And the city never forgot that it had been the launching point for a revolution in German music, maintaining orchestral standards so rigorous that conductors from across Europe viewed a Dresden posting as both an honor and a test of their capabilities. The university quarters revealed another layer of this multifaceted city, where the Technical University was pioneering research in chemistry and engineering that would reshape industrial Europe, while its students lived in boarding houses decorated with reproductions of Italian masters and argued late into the night about Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, creating an intellectual environment where scientific rationalism and romantic idealism existed not as opposites but as complementary modes of understanding the world. The laboratory smelled of sulfur and possibility, of compounds being synthesized that had never existed before, while in the libraries next door, scholars pored over medieval manuscripts illuminated by monks who had believed the world was 6,000 years old, and somehow both activities felt equally valid, equally necessary to the Dresden project of accumulating and creating beauty in all its forms. The Jewish quarter contributed its own essential strand to this cultural tapestry, with families who had been part of Dresden's commercial life for generations, operating galleries and publishing houses and textile concerns that connected Saxon craftsmanship to markets in London and Paris and New York. Their synagogue on Pulsnitzer Strasse, representing an architectural dialogue between Moorish revival aesthetics and German bourgeois propriety, a building that announced integration without assimilation, contribution without surrender of identity. These were the families who ensured that Dresden remained cosmopolitan, even as German nationalism grew increasingly strident, who maintained correspondence with cousins in Prague and Vienna and Berlin, creating information networks that kept Saxon culture connected to broader European currents. Even as political boundaries hardened, the gardens deserved their own epic, particularly the Grosser Garten that sprawled southeast of the city center, like a declaration that nature, too, could be organized according to Baroque principles without losing its essential wildness. Here, the electoral princes had created a landscape that moved from formal French parterres near the palace to increasingly natural English-style glades.
A dream of order and
power
leisure and intergenerational
a spatial metaphor for Enlightenment philosophy that visitors could experience physically by simply taking an afternoon stroll. Families would spend entire Sundays here, the children sailing boats on the palace pond while parents read newspapers beneath linden trees, the entire scene representing a vision of civil society that felt specifically German, yet universally human, a dream of order and leisure and intergenerational continuity that the 20th century would shatter so completely that even photographs of such scenes would eventually seem like archaeological evidence from a vanished civilization. The railway stations told the story of Dresden's transformation from electoral seat to industrial powerhouse, their iron and glass construction representing the moment when Saxon Baroque met Prussian engineering and produced something new. A faith in progress that maintained aesthetic standards, a belief that even the most utilitarian structures deserve to be beautiful. The Hauptbahnhof's platforms channeled thousands of travelers daily toward Berlin, toward Vienna, toward the world beyond Saxony. Yet its design insisted that this transition from local to global be accomplished with grace, that the last thing a departing passenger should see was evidence that Dresden valued beauty even in spaces devoted to departure and goodbye. What no one could have predicted as the 20th century accelerated toward catastrophe was that this entire world, this 3-century accumulation of art and knowledge and refined living, would prove as fragile as the porcelain that had funded its creation. that a single night in
And the
February
decoration of
1945
facades
would
represent
reduce
You
what
see
had
the
taken
detail here?
generations
This is
to
how your
build into
grandfather
rubble
taught
and
me to
ash,
preserve the stone.
transforming Europe's
It's
most
coming along
beautiful city
beautifully. We will
into a
finish
symbol
this
of
section
total
today.
war's
Dresden
capacity
before
for
the bombs was
annihilation.
not simply
The
a
old
beautiful
photographs
city.
that survive show
It
us
was
a
an
place that
argument
seems
made in
almost
stone
mythological
and
now,
porcelain
a
and
urban
music
environment where
Life
every
could be
structure was
organized
considered
according
not
to
merely
principles of
functional but
grace,
meaningful,
that power
where
could be
aesthetic
expressed
decisions
through
carried moral
refinement
weight,
rather than force,
where the arrangement of
that whole
buildings
society
and the
could value
decoration
its
of
artists as
facades
highly as its
represented a
generals
collective
and emerged
belief
stronger
that
rather than weaker
civilization
for that
was not
choice.
just
That this
possible,
argument was
but
ultimately
mandatory, that humans could create beauty in community and sustain it across generations if only they maintained the discipline and the vision and the
we
commitment.
encounter images of this
Dresden
vanished
before the
world,
bombs
this
was not
Dresden
simply a
that
beautiful
exists
city.
now only in
It was an
photographs and
argument made in
memories,
stone
and the
and
fragments
porcelain and music that
before
life
that
could be
survived
organized according to
accuse
principles
us
of
of
grace,
forgetting what we
that
once
power
knew
could be
how to
expressed through
build.
refinement rather than force, that a society could value its artists as highly as its generals and emerge stronger rather than weaker for that choice. That this argument was ultimately answered with fire does not diminish its validity. It only demonstrates how completely the 20th century would reject the 19th century's most optimistic assumptions about human nature and progress, and why those of us born after the catastrophe feel such piercing loss when we encounter images of this vanished world, this Dresden that exists now only in photographs and memories, and the fragments that survive to accuse us of forgetting what we once knew how to build.